There is something quiet about the idea of a world before sound, before the waves, before the wind, before even time. The Norse people imagined such a place, or rather such a non-place. They called it Ginnungagap, which roughly means the yawning emptiness. It wasn't quite dark, because darkness is still something. It wasn't light either, because light has to come from somewhere. It was, instead, a quiet in-between, endless and without shape, like a still lake that hasn't yet decided what it will reflect. In this gap there were no stars, no sky, and no gods. But far on one side of this emptiness, something began to exist. Niflheim, the land of ice, of mists, of quiet frost. There were rivers there, slow and heavy, moving like thoughts through sleep. They carried strange cold substances, not quite water, not quite air. On the other side of the void was another world, Muspelheim, the land of fire. It was not the bright fire of a camp, or the golden light of a hearth. It was a deep, ancient heat, the kind that hums in the bones of the earth. It did not roar because there was no air yet to feed it. It simply was. Patient, eternal, waiting. For ages, these two halves of existence stayed apart, one frozen, one aflame. But as the ages moved, the breath of Muspelheim drifted into the gap. When its warmth met the drifting frost of Niflheim, the first drops of melt began to form. And from those drops, quiet and heavy in the mist, came the first living being. They called him Ymir, the giant. He was not born of a mother or father, for there were none. He simply was, formed from the meeting of opposites. The heat that gives life and the cold that preserves it. Ymir was immense, and as he slept, new forms appeared around him. Beings made of the sweat that gathered beneath his arms, and from his legs that brushed against one another. The Norse did not picture this as strange, they saw it as natural, the slow, silent multiplication of life in a world still half asleep. From the melting ice also came a second being, a calm and gentle cow named Audumla. Her name means something like rich hornless one. She was smooth, soft, and patient. From her flowed 4 rivers of milk, and with that milk she nourished Ymir. But Audumla herself needed food, so she licked the salty ice blocks that stood near her, day after day, quietly, rhythmically, as if sculpting something without knowing what. After the first day of licking, a single strand of hair emerged from the ice. After the second, a head. After the third, a full being, tall, calm, and dignified. This was Buri, the first of the gods. He was silent and strong, a shape of order forming in a world still made mostly of chaos. Buri had a son named Bor, and Bor took as his wife a giantess, one of Ymir's descendants. Together they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 sons would later become the first gods to act with thought and intention. They were not like Ymir, who simply existed. They were aware, curious about what could be built from what already was. Time in those early ages didn't pass the way we know it. It drifted, slow and circular. But eventually, Odin and his brothers realized that as long as Ymir lived, the world would remain heavy and uncertain, filled with chaotic life that had no place to rest. So they decided quietly and deliberately to use Ymir's great body to make something new. When they slew him, his blood flowed endlessly, like the melting of all the ice at once. The flood drowned most of the other giants, though a few escaped, carried away on pieces of floating frost. From one of those survivors, the next generation of giants would descend. With Ymir gone, Odin and his brothers began their quiet work. They took his immense body and shaped the world from it. Not in haste, but with the patience of craftsmen. His flesh became the solid ground, his bones the mountains, his teeth and shattered bones the stones and pebbles, his blood the seas and lakes, and his skull the great dome of the sky, a quiet, curved shelter above all. To hold it in place, they set 4 dwarves at the corners, giving them the names Nordri, Sudri, Austri, and Vestri, north, south, east, and west. The Norse world was not meant to float in space, but to rest in balance, held steady by the patient hands of those 4 silent beings. Then the brothers took sparks that drifted from Muspelheim and set them in the sky. Those sparks became the stars. They did not shimmer as ours do now. They were steady, small fires to mark the rhythm of time. From Ymir's eyebrows, Odin formed a fence, a protective circle around a middle land. Inside that circle, he placed the beings that would one day be humans. He called this place Midgard, the middle enclosure. It was meant to be a safe space between the fiery worlds below and the frozen ones beyond. On a quiet shore, Odin and his brothers found 2 logs of wood that had washed up from the sea. One was ash, straight and pale, the other elm with darker grain. They studied these pieces for a long while. The wood was smooth but lifeless. Still, they could see potential, something that could hold breath. Odin gave them life and spirit, a gentle pulse. Vili gave them understanding and movement, the ability to think and act. Ve gave them form and senses, so they could see, hear, and speak. The first man they called Ask, from the ash tree. The first woman, Embla, from the elm. They placed them within Midgard, where the air was calm and the seas still learning their boundaries. The gods left them there, once small, fragile, but alive. And so the slow heartbeat of the human world began. Over time, the new world became more defined, more structured. Odin and his brothers did not stop at one land. They formed many, 9 realms in total, each resting like a layer or branch of a great tree. That tree was Yggdrasil, the world tree. It was vast, stretching between heaven, earth, and what lay beneath. Its roots drank from deep wells, its branches touched the sky. Some said Odin himself would one day hang from it to seek the wisdom that lies between life and death. At its highest branch was Asgard, the home of the gods. It was calm and golden, filled with halls that shone even in mist. Beneath it was Midgard, where humans would live their short but meaningful lives. To the east lay Jotunheim, the land of the giants, those who had survived Ymir's flood. It was rough, untamed, full of tall peaks and long memories. To the south, Muspelheim, still burning with ancient fire. To the north, Niflheim, still whispering with cold. Other realms filled the spaces between. Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods, peaceful, wise, more attuned to nature. Alfheim, where light elves drifted like thoughts. Svartalfheim, or Nidavellir, where dwarves worked quietly underground, shaping metal as if it were clay. And far below in the depths lay Helheim, the place where the dead rested, ruled by a being who would come much later. In those early days, the worlds were new and quiet. There was no war yet, no jealousy. The gods observed what they had made, and the humans began to build fires, to sing softly, to name the stars that Odin had hung above them. And somewhere in that calm, the great cow Audhumla faded from memory, her purpose fulfilled. The frost still lingered at the edges of creation, but it no longer threatened to take everything back. It was a time of balance. Cold and warmth, life and stillness, all held in a quiet rhythm. And though the gods were already powerful, they were not yet wise. That would come later, with curiosity, mistakes, and sacrifice. In the quiet space above the realms of men, there existed Asgard, the home of the Aesir, the gods of the sky. It was a place of gentle hills, wide plains, and soft, shining halls. The light there did not burn or blind, but shimmered calmly like sunlight filtering through thin clouds. At the beginning, the first of the gods was Odin, often thought of as the All-Father. Odin was tall and long-bearded, with eyes that seemed to reflect the quiet of many worlds. His hair was pale as ash, and he walked softly across the fields of Asgard. He had two ravens, Hugin and Munin, whose names meant thought and memory. They rarely cawed or flapped noisily. Instead, they glided over the lands below and returned to perch upon his shoulders, whispering the slow news of Midgard and other realms. Odin liked to sit beneath the Yggdrasil, the great ash tree whose branches reached into the sky and roots sank into the deep earth, watching the worlds and letting his mind drift gently from one idea to another. Beside Odin was his brother Vili, and his other brother Ve. Vili was calm and measured, often counting stars or tracing the rivers of light that connected realms. Ve was quiet too, though he had a knack for making small objects gleam with a gentle beauty. Things like the first golden cups or the simple bracelets that the gods sometimes wore. Together they walked the edges of the world, making small arrangements of stones, shaping rivers, and smoothing paths between trees, so that the lands were ordered in a way that made sense, slow and easy to follow. They looked upon the realms and decided to shape something new. In a quiet corner of the world, they found two logs. One was pale and soft, the other dark and firm. From the pale log they made Ask, the first man, and from the dark log they made Embla, the first woman. They breathed life into them, not in a rush, but with a calm, careful air. They gave them warmth, thought, and feeling. Ask and Embla awoke slowly, blinking under the light of a sky that stretched far above them. The gods watched quietly, letting the new humans stretch their limbs and take in the world. In Asgard, life did not hurry. The gods built their halls slowly. Odin had a home called Valeskjalf, a broad hall with a roof that shone like silver. There he could look over all of Asgard and the worlds beyond. The hall had long, empty corridors that echoed lightly when one walked across them, and a gentle fire that never roared but flickered calmly, casting soft shadows. The quiet halls gave space for the gods to think and rest. Then there was Frigg, Odin's wife, a goddess of calm foresight and gentle care. Frigg was often seen tending small gardens, weaving threads that glimmered like morning mist. She thought slowly about the future, though not in a worried way, more like someone watching a river and noticing which way it bends. Her words were few, but each one settled like soft rain, leaving a small mark of thought in the minds of those who heard her. She often walked with Odin beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, letting the slow rhythm of the world guide them. Among the gods were also Thor, son of Odin, and Baldur, another son. Thor was strong and broad, with hair like pale fire. His hammer, Mjolnir, was not always used, but rested quietly at his side, a steady companion. Thor liked to walk the long roads that led toward Midgard, listening to the wind and watching clouds drift lazily across the sky. Baldur, on the other hand, had a lightness to him. He moved softly and smiled often, though not in laughter that startled, but in a gentle acknowledgement of the quiet beauty around him. Flowers, soft breezes, and the small creatures of the world often seemed to pause near him, as if noticing his calm presence. The gods of Asgard did not rush to make war or quarrel. They spent much time in small, careful work. Heimdall, who would later guard the Rainbow Bridge, Bifrost, began by walking along the edges of the realms, noting the subtle differences in light and sound. He had eyes and ears so keen that he could see and hear the faintest changes, yet he did not act hastily. He observed slowly as one might watch leaves drift on a quiet pond. Loki, a god of change, was a quiet presence in this early time. He moved with a soft slipperiness like water flowing over stones. His laughter was gentle, more a ripple than a shout. He did not disturb the others, but his thoughts sometimes carried him into places the other gods did not go. He would sit on mossy rocks, tracing patterns in the dirt, noticing shapes that shifted when the wind blew. Odin and Frigg sometimes watched him quietly, unsure what he might do, but never hurrying him. Life in Asgard was often simple. Gods and goddesses tended to gardens, walked along the soft grass, or spent long hours in silent conversation beneath Yggdrasil. There were small animals too, quiet ones that wandered the halls or fields. Deer with soft eyes, foxes that padded soundlessly over the earth, and birds with calm songs. The presence of living things gave the world a sense of slow rhythm. Even the rivers of Asgard did not rush. They moved gently over stones, their surfaces glinting like silver in the calm light. Sometimes the gods would gather together. They did not shout or argue loudly. They would sit in a circle on soft grass or polished stone floors. Odin would speak of visions and dreams. Frigg might offer a quiet thought or a small story, and the others would nod or let the words drift through the space between them. They shared thoughts slowly, letting ideas settle like gentle snowfall. Thor might tell a story about a long journey across a quiet sky. Balder would describe a flower he had seen in Midgard, and Heimdall might note a soft change in the wind. Even Loki would offer a trick or puzzle, but it was more for quiet amusement than trouble. In these early days, the gods also took care to name things. Mountains, rivers, and valleys all received names, not grand or elaborate, but simple and soft, so that when spoken they would rest easily on the tongue. They gave birds and beasts names too, small and careful sounds that fit the creatures like a soft glove. Naming was a gentle act, as if they were arranging the world into a calm pattern, not forcing it, but guiding it quietly. The halls of the gods were filled with soft light, but not always bright. Sometimes Odin would sit in shadowed corners, and Thor might wander under the boughs of Yggdrasil where sunlight barely reached. Frigg would walk slowly between them, her presence a gentle tether that kept the world feeling stable. Baldur's laughter, soft as wind and leaves, would drift through the halls. Even Loki, though he might move unpredictably, did so in a way that was more curious than alarming. The gods spent long hours thinking about balance. Odin thought about the worlds above and below, considering what it meant for all things to exist quietly in their places. Frigg thought about care, not as a burden, but as a gentle shaping of what might come. Thor thought about protection, but in a measured way, not sudden or urgent. Baldur thought about light, about what it meant for the world to be calm and steady. Heimdall thought about observation, noticing tiny shifts that might go unseen. And Loki, soft in his own way, thought about change and the gentle surprises it might bring. Time in Asgard did not rush. Days and nights passed slowly, like clouds drifting across a vast, silent sky. Seasons changed, not in abrupt flashes, but in gradual steps. The frost that quietly painted leaves in silver, the soft thaw that let rivers run gently again, the calm bloom of flowers that appeared without hurry. Even the storms, when they came, were brief and mild, letting rain fall softly and leave the earth quiet and refreshed. In these early days, the gods had few needs. Food was simple, often bread or fruit gathered from quiet groves. Water came from gentle streams. Sleep was long and calm, with no urgency. They enjoyed each other's presence without words, sometimes sitting together silently for hours, listening to the faint, almost imperceptible sounds of life around them. The early days of Asgard were not full of drama, battles, or loud deeds. They were gentle, slow, and measured. The gods learned each other's ways gradually. They discovered what made each presence in their realm comforting or unusual. They walked softly, spoke softly, and let the rhythm of the world dictate their actions. Even the smallest stone or the tiniest leaf was attended to with quiet care. The gods began to understand their places. Odin with his thought and memory, Frigg with her care and foresight, Thor with his measured strength, Baldur with his gentle light, Heimdall with his observation, Loki with his subtle change. They moved together not in haste but in quiet harmony. And Asgard in those early days existed as a calm, luminous space, waiting, observing, and gently preparing for the events of the future.